Hey, it's Adam Tracy again, and I want to talk about BVI VISTA Trust, and that stands for the Virgin Islands Specialty Trust Act, which is very unique and the first of its kind because when you look at any sort of like offshore asset protection trust, the trustee has a fiduciary obligation to manage the assets of the trust. And so if you have a company that is held in trust, that trustee, who may know nothing about your company, has a fiduciary obligation to manage that company, right? And that includes like the hiring and firing of officers, directors, and any sort of significant action involving that asset. So the Vista Trust takes that away, disengages the trustee, and basically says, okay, fine, you can put the shares of a company into the trust, but the trustee cannot actively manage or have a say in managing that business, right? So you, as the proprietor of that business, can assign your shares to the Vista Trust and continue to run it, make decisions regarding who are officers, directors, and all that stuff. So that's the huge value of it. Now, in addition to that, you have similar, things that you see in like the Cook Islands with like a trust protector and all the accoutrements of like the trust being creditor proof. What's nice about the BVI is one, its proximity versus like the Cook Islands, the cost. Okay, so you're setting up the trust, but also like a BVI entity, but also the asset protection benefits that inure to the BVI in any context, which, while existing in places like the Cook Islands, they're not as strong, and people really, like in the Cook Islands, in my experience, rely on the fact that it's just too out of the way to like litigate or try to go after assets. And at the same time, those trusts suffer from the optics of it, right? People don't want to like contract with anybody in the Cook Islands, whereas the BVI, it's a legitimate place. So the BVI, and I've talked about this before in other contexts, it has a 2-year statute of limitations for claims. Well, if, right, by the time you got out of a court here, it's going to be past 2 years. If you immediately went to the BVI, there's also impediments. One, you have to post a bond in almost the full amount of the amount that you're seeking. And two, it's on English rules in the sense that loser pays, right? And now you're also paying an attorney on top of it. So it's very difficult to litigate or really get anything out of any entity in the BVI. But when you layer in a trust on top of like an operating entity, where you have like the clawback provisions that you find in any offshore trust, right, with regard to assets, either by the trust protector or the trustee when the trust comes under legal duress, that is there, plus the benefits of that. Moreover, when you talk about foreign judgment registration, which means like I could get a judgment in the States and then I can simply go like register that judgment, just basically file it in BVI or somewhere else. That's done by like treaties, right, between nations and among nations and things like that. Well, for the large part, the BVI, while subject to like treaties, does a very poor job of actually adhering to those treaties. So when that happens, the process is exceedingly complex, as a high rate of not being successful. And then you start to bump up against like statute of limitations issues, also like the 6-year look back for fraud and things like that, because it just takes so long and things just generally go slower there, right? So that is the Vista Trust, which by all accounts is a very cost-effective asset protection structure that is not the Cook Islands or Nevis or some other place where inherently, when people see that, counterparties to business transactions see that, they go, maybe I shouldn't do business with you because that's kind of like a piratey, shady place. So Vista Trust, have any questions, you always find me at adamtracy.io. I'll talk to you next time. Cheers.